Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Designing Academic Libraries for Student Success, which is sponsored by OccuSpace. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Now I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars and watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to share any questions or comments for our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for throughout the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you'd like or would like to be addressed. Also, there's closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom panel of your screen. Also note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version and where to access today's slides. Before we get started, Georgia Tech Library Communications Director Jason Wright has asked that we make it clear his participation in this webinar is not an endorsement of OccuSpace or Burrow Happold or their products or services. And with that, we're ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Elliot.
Well, thanks, Sabrina. It's really great to be here. We're so excited to see so many folks joining and learning with us as we think about data, gathering it, sharing it, using it to enable student success. And I think we're in for a great conversation. We'll try and keep it informal so that we're really thinking through these problems and opportunities, these opportunities together. And we'll be taking questions throughout. So at key moments, so we encourage you to use that Q&A function. We may not get to everything, but we're excited to get to a great discussion. And I'll start off with some introductions. My name is Elliot Felix. I lead the higher ed strategy practice at a company called Bureau Happold, a global engineering and consulting firm. We used to be called Brightspot. Many in the library world know us as Brightspot, and my personal mission is student success. It's really about understanding what students need and then thinking through the spaces, the services, the staffing, the systems, the strategy that helps them get there. And I'm delighted to welcome Jason Wright. Jason, please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Jason Wright. I'm the communications director here at the Georgia Tech Library. And if you're wondering, well, what does communications director have to do with, gathering data and OccuSpace and stuff? One of the job functions that I do here is strategic planning. And so as we'll get into in some of our focus group research, we realized we had a big need with students, and that's what set us on the path to look for a product that could tell us where people were at the library in real time.
And Matt, this is where you come in.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. Thanks, Jason. So good to be here. Thanks for the invitation to participate today. So I'm Matt Boyd. I lead the sales team here at OccuSpace, and I've got a unique perspective here because Jason and I have been talking for even before you had OccuSpace, and really thrilled to see the data and the results come to life here. And we are an occupancy space utilization data company. Make it really easy for our customers to get access to some insight in terms of how those spaces are used, and we'll share some insights a little bit later in the conversation today, but looking forward to a good discussion.
Well, it's great to have you both here. And today we're really going to be talking about Georgia Tech's journey from guessing to knowing and using data to enable student success in the library and beyond. And I think a great place to start is understanding where everyone in the audience, where you are in your journey. And so we have a quick poll to get a sense of where you're at. Are you, as you're trying to think about better using data, are you just kind of conducting the initial research? You're trying to build some awareness about the need for it? Are you making the case for impact and the investment that it'll take? Are you looking at people to work with internally and externally to do that? Are you deploying sensors or mining data? Are you using it to make long-term decisions? Are you using it to make day-to-day operations? Are you gathering and acting on the data as kind of who you are, and it's really a part of everything you do? Which of these best defines where you're at in your journey? So we've got, I guess amongst a group of library professionals, the fact that research is at the top, I maybe shouldn't be surprised, but I'm also heartened. So we have lots of folks researching the topic. We have some folks that are building the awareness around the need, some folks that are making the case, some folks that are working with the data, using it for long-term decisions, using it for day-to-day operations. And 22% of you feel like data is part of everything you do, which is congratulations. I'm ready for you to take over for the rest of the webinar, because that's really where we're all trying to get to. And I think as we get into the Georgia Tech journey, we want to and help you along your journey from conducting the research to, at the other end of the spectrum, making data every part of everything you do. I think we want to set some context, understand the context, understand how libraries are changing. And we've got some great data to bring to the table on that Matt's going to pull up in a second. Because as we're thinking about what the library of the future looks like, I think there are multiple futures, there are multiple libraries, and data can tell us some things that might be happening nationally, and then you can be thinking about that, how that applies to you in your library. But a couple of the key things we wanted to share to maybe set a foundation. We, working with OccuSpace, got anonymized sensor data for about 3 years from 38 different institutions. And one of the interesting findings was that main libraries are used about 40% more than satellite libraries. So at a time when people are thinking about how do we make the best use of resources, how do we rationalize what we offer, where we offer it, how we offer it, when we're open, where we're open, this is kind of interesting because it might help you when you look at your version of this in terms of where you're at, and maybe that informs consolidation or of maybe branches or not. The other thing we found was that given that our talk is about libraries and student success, one thing we found is that maybe this is confirming our intuition collectively, but we found that libraries with student success functions were used about 20 to 25% more. So when they had writing, tutoring, math lab, advising functions in them, those libraries were used more than those that did not. Conversely, collections were not really correlated with usage. I think it was R was about 0.28, and at the same time, we know that classrooms and dining libraries don't exist in isolation or on an island, and they're part of a whole campus ecosystem of spaces and services and support and staff. And so we know that nearby dining actually draws some use away from the library, perhaps not surprisingly, but nearby classrooms drive use. So there's some interesting things you can do with sensor data to understand where people are, when they're going there, how long they're staying, and it can tell you where to look about why all those things are happening, and it can inform planning about how do we make our library a hub for student success. So having sort of set the stage nationally, Jason, I'm interested to hear what you're seeing locally at Georgia Tech.
Absolutely. Well, I would just say, as you were talking, I was really struck by the fact that exactly what you described is what we see at the Georgia Tech Library. So in this photo, what you're looking at is Price Gilbert Memorial Library, originally built in 1952. It's connected to my far right over there. You can see a little bit of Clough Undergraduate Learning Commons. Clough Undergraduate Learning Commons is also a 24-hour building. They are connected, and it has all the student success and classrooms. So the data that we maintain is for all three buildings. Dining is far away. We do have a coffee shop in one library building and then Clough itself, but absolutely the data you found is supported by what we're seeing on site. If you can go to the next slide. So the next slide is just if you can see year to year, basically our gate counts. The one on the left is the Clough Undergraduate Learning Commons. The one on the right is the library. Now, I really do want to add a little bit of context to this. 23 through 20. So if you're looking at Clough, you're looking at just 2023. If you're looking at Price Gilbert and Crosland Tower, which are collectively the library, they are connected together. Um, those are best guesses. 2024, when we launched OccuSpace, because we launched OccuSpace in finals of December 2023. So 2024 is the first complete year of data that we have. And it is a perfect data set. Like we know exactly how many people have come in here. We know how long they stay. We know where they like to stay. Before it was really a best guess. Some extra context for the Georgia Tech Library is, like I said, the original building was built in 1952. That's Price Gilbert. The graduate edition, now called Crosland Tower, was built in 1968. And they operated continuously. Clough was built in 2011. And then in 2015, 2016, we started renovations to the library. And that lasted from basically 2016 through 2019. During that time, we moved actually all for construction, all of our collections to cold storage with Emory University. And so we opened Crosland Tower back in January 2019, and then we opened Price Gilbert back in 2020, August of 2020. Prior to renovation, the way that we were able to get gate counts was students had to swipe their buzz cards to get into the library. We did not have that from 2020 on. We had an older system that existed in Clough, but it started to not be supported. And so that 2023 was absolutely our best guess. However, now we know exactly. And if we can go to the next slide, last calendar year, more than 1.8 million visits in the library. Peak daily visitors of, over 5,100. Our peak hours, 2 to 4, and the average dwell time is over an hour. For Clough, more than 2 million. Peak visitors of 6,200 and change. Peak hours, 2 to 4, same. Average dwell time, 48. What you'll see in Clough is more class driven. It's labs, it's lecture halls. The library is more study and collaborative work and social driven. The other interesting thing, and we'll get into this, the further you go up in the library, the quieter it gets and the longer people stay. And so that's one of the great insights that this data has been able to give us. And I have a little note here that we'll get into a little bit later on as we talk. But essentially, what we're able to do now is, since we've been open for more or less 5 years post-pandemic, we're now in a stage where we have a project of looking at all of our spaces. Are they as utilized as they can be? Is the furniture the best type of furniture that can be there? And we're using a lot of this data that we have from OccuSpace to inform our decision making, in addition to focus group research and surveys and all sorts of information like that. We're able to combine those things to get to a really great spot where we feel comfortable with the decisions that we're making.
Well, it's great to see now you kind of have you have the data that previously you're guessing at. So your journey is like from guessing to knowing, and it's informing your future planning. And it's also great to see. I know a lot of libraries are not back to pre-pandemic levels of usage, but just looking at that, you're crushing, and people are back in numbers.
If I can say, yeah. So Spring 25, which just ended at the beginning of May, is historically our busiest semester we've ever had across the board in terms of in-person interactions at our service desks, in terms of people being in the building. We are busier than we have ever been.
That's awesome. And I guess, having worked with you all 10 plus years ago to create a new service and staffing model and reimagine the spaces, um, it's kind of amazing to see the progress. And I know as part of that, we were doing the focus groups and the interviews and mining the data and looking at transactions, how much is directional assistance and how much is a proper reference consult and everything in between. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you sort of how do you go broad and deep? How do you combine these different data sets? You're getting occupancy data at the same time you're talking to people, and we've got a question about demographics. So not just how much visiting, but who's visiting. So maybe you could talk about how you bring these different methods together, and maybe talk a little bit about the who, not just the how much.
Absolutely. So I can answer this one question right off. I'll go ahead and hit answer live. Um, okay, perfect. We do not glean demographic information from users at all in really any library service. That is a decision that we have made
It's almost like
as
you care about their privacy. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So we don't get that. The product itself simply tallies Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signals in a space. Um, Now, in terms of your question, can you ask your first question, your question again? How do I go deep and how do I go wide? Right. So the real tactical answer to that is we have what we call a portfolio process, which is essentially a project management process. And so when it comes time for, okay, we want a project, and this project is going to look at um, occupancy and use of services and spaces in the building. And so what we do is we convene a group, and it's made up of, you have some subject matter experts, you have a person who leads it, everybody gets together and they bring their own data sets with them. And if they don't necessarily have that, then we know how to get it. So for instance, in addition to the occupancy data of telling us once again, if you were to look at the seventh floor reading room or the sixth floor reading room, which are quiet, they are the most heavily used, and they have the people stay there the longest. Okay. Then if we go down to say the third floor multimedia commons, which is a reading room on one side and then sort of like computer lab on the other side, we have all the tallies of how many people are using those machines, how many posters they're printing there, how many interactions we're having with our student assistants there, that sort of thing. We also combine that with the actual card swipes. So our occupancy is really multiple data streams kind of combined together. One is these are the people that are out in the basic reading rooms doing whatever. But then we've also got study rooms, breakout study rooms. How many card swipes? What was the reservation of that? Um, then when you combine that as well with things like we have a gadget service that is actually the primary driver of our circulation now. That gadget service, what types of things are people using? How are they using them? Sorry, somebody was at my door. Um, you know, you combine all those things together, and then when you start to get into, okay, and then we go down and we invite students to come in and tell us what they think about the space or how they might use the space, or we provide them with photos of what it could look like, and they give us rankings. All of these things, this focus group research, more qualitative data type things. And then we also had a survey that went out to campus. So it's really just about the synergy of all those data streams together. And then basically it's our job as those subject matter experts in that group to take all that information, pull what we can from it, come up with recommendations, and then bring that to leadership. And then from there, look at, okay, well, in terms of budget, what type of furniture might we be able to buy here? Or if we're going to say, if we had a service that isn't performing at the level that we wanted it to, and we can tell that because of card swipes to a specific room, we know that we need more space for quiet study.
Right.
So what if we flip that space, And so we have those conversations, and that's that kind of trip through the sausage factory kind of ugly process of everybody, sort of beating it out and figuring it out. That's how we're able to reach our decisions.
I love the mixed methods approach, and the fact that you're not just kind of investigating things that you're curious about. You're, really thinking about how you're going to make decisions, budgeting, renovations, whatever it might be. I'd love to look under the hood a little bit. Matt, can you talk a little bit about how you've helped Georgia Tech gather these data, and there's, as you do that, maybe there's a couple of more technical questions here in the chat about what if people have multiple devices, the kinds of things I'm sure you get a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Elliot. Thanks, Jason. So I'll start with just a very brief overview of OccuSpace and how we go about doing what we do and how we provide the data to Jason and the team at Georgia Tech and other clients in higher education. So OccuSpace was started and was actually born out of higher education. We got our start at UC San Diego. And the goal at the time was to solve a very similar set of challenges that Jason alluded to and mentioned at the beginning. This whole concept of stop guessing, start knowing. The application and the use case at the time, it's one of our founders was looking for a better place to study during finals at Geisel Library. Very big, very comparable in size to Georgia Tech's libraries, they're all connected, and they're just looking for a place to study. They set out to create the first version of OccuSpace, and they built an app. And I'll talk in a second about how the tech works, but they built an app that presented how busy the spaces were. Posted to Facebook, first week, got about 10,000 downloads. It was a hit. They weren't the only impatient college kids on campus looking for a better place to study. And so UC San Diego became our first customer, and we have grown since, working with about 100 different universities across the country. So again, we understand the challenges, we understand the needs, we understand even how to navigate some of the internal landscape and the nuance of working in higher education. And how the tech works is we make a very small form factor sensor, looks just like this, plugs directly into electrical outlets. So something that is readily available in every institution across the country. Plug these in roughly one every 2,000 to 3,000 square feet or so. And what the sensor is doing is it's passively listening for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signals in a space. So those signals that are coming off of people's devices like watches, other wearables, phones, laptops, tablets, devices do not need to be connected to the wireless network. They do not need to be connected to anything. We're simply listening for the presence of that signal activity. I think there was a question in there in the chat about in the Q&A about how that works. We're simply listening for the presence of that signal activity. We run it through a machine learning algorithm with AI that calculates the number of people. So we know better than anybody else if 12 signals over here is one person or 12 signals over here is 3 people. Again, you do not need to be using any of the services or anything like that. Our installation at Georgia Tech, simple, straightforward, took about 4 or 5 hours on site in terms of plugging in the sensors. And then we go about calibrating a custom model for each of the spaces throughout the libraries in totality here. I think there was another question in the Q&A just about how do we look at and understand occupancy data by floor. So we're able to build customized zones and areas based on what customer feedback is and what the needs are in terms of how we go about doing that. That's just a brief overview on OccuSpace. Yeah, Elliot?
That's great. And I think, you see the value, Jason, you see the value, but I would love to hear, your process of making a case for this, Jason. There's a question on, any tips to get the parent institution to recognize the value of data. So tell us a little bit about how you made the case for gathering, using, acting on the data.
Absolutely. So I would just say, as an overview, we are lucky being at a STEM institution that there is a heavy reliance on data to drive any decisions that you have. For specifically what happened here, like I said, I'm part of the strategic planning effort. Myself and a plan partner, Kimberly Sheldon, build the library's strategic plan. I have a master's in strategic planning. That's what I was doing in addition to journalism before I came to Georgia Tech. And so when that opportunity arose, we jumped on it and we kind of built the plan out and did all the work that you would normally do in terms of research, researching our internal people, researching the students who use our libraries, uh, researching faculty advisory boards and student advisory boards, that sort of thing. And one thing that we kept hearing again and again and again from students is, I want to know where people are not. Because we do have,
They're antisocial or
well, it's really much more just about like, I hate walking into a library and trying to find a study space, and I got to walk around for 20 minutes and I got to find a study space.
right, or walking across campus and you encounter a full space and you got to
Exactly.
trudge all the way back to your dorm or wherever, residence
Exactly.
hall.
And so that really stuck out as one of the things. Okay, we need to go find a solution for this. And so as part of the project team, we then had a focus group of students who worked with us. And what was interesting is they kind of gave us some parameters that we really had to follow. Number one was no cameras. They did not want cameras. Number two was it cannot keep data. Like, it has to get rid of the data. It should know anything about me. And then a driver that we had was, we have new buildings. So we can't really make any infrastructure improvements or changes to what we've just been given. And so a number of the systems, when we went to market that we looked at, they were camera based. That is the classic model, as I understand it, from doing the research into how retail occupancy and office occupancy has traditionally worked. Is you stick a camera at every entrance and exit, and then there is a computer program in the background, recognizing heads and shoulders and doing the math constantly to figure out, I've got this many people in this space. That is usually done by power over Ethernet, which means that it gets power and internet at the same time. Well, we did not have that at every door entrance and exit. So basically, a humongous upfront cost for us was going to be installing all of that equipment. I mean, I'm talking $250,000 to $500,000 immediately before we ever looked at any actual data. And what was great about the OccuSpace is it was just the plugin. So it just utilized existing plugins. We popped those in. It had no camera, and it got rid of all the data that it keeps numbers, but it doesn't provide any identifiable data. And we confirmed that with a number of other clients, including North Carolina State University. I believe Johns Hopkins was one we looked at and talked to extensively about how they use it, especially how they tied it into their website. And so those were really the driving factors for us. And then it really became, okay, we think we've got the right product. How much is this going to cost? Okay, well, how do we get the money for this? And that was an interesting one as well. Like Matt said, we had been talking a long time before we ever made the move to OccuSpace, just because it took us quite a while to get the funding, because we used a novel funding source at Georgia Tech called TechFee that every student pays into, and it's for technology infrastructure improvements for every student. And it just took a long time to get through that process.
It's interesting though, because sometimes the tech fee is quite nebulous, and folks are kind of creating a pool that they're doing lots of things with. Where this seems like I didn't know that till just now, but it seems like a really immediate case you can make, which is we're going to adopt this platform and it's going to directly enhance the student experience because they're going to know where to go, or know before they go. I think that's Zach. I'm interested, Matt, to hear from you about how, how do folks who are trying to like make the case for this kind of system, is Jason's story a familiar one, or you have any other tips and tricks for folks who are trying to, make the case for better gathering data, acting on the data, integrating it with other assessment they're doing?
Yeah. So I think absolutely what everyone's hearing from Jason is spot on with what I hear out in the market quite a bit. I think that there are a couple cool things that first and foremost, everybody who's attending this webinar is really like one of the best places I would say to start. It starts with educating yourself a little bit more about learning about what's possible, the art of the possible, because every customer that I talk to is really in the guessing phase. Like before they start with any data service, right? They're in that guessing phase. And oftentimes they need proof points, case studies, examples like what Jason and Georgia Tech have done. And there's numerous others as well that we have, but it's having those examples connecting as well. Like Jason mentioned earlier, he talked to his peers at other universities. And I think it's some of that stitching together the fabric and being able to talk about how the data helped him in this case and is helping him paint a better story on campus, even get things like budget approval and so on. Those are some of the most important elements, but I think it really has to do with having real examples of other schools and other places where this data has been used to deliver better outcomes, not just for students. That is what we're all here for, of course, but the things that help deliver better outcomes to students. Funding for the library, for instance, can help improve the facilities there too.
It strikes me that in addition to that, kind of like the benchmarking and the case studies and the comparisons to make the case, once you're on a platform that a lot of people are using, then you open up, like there's a potential for a network effect, right? Where you can see how your occupancy compares to others. Have you gotten to the point, Jason, where folks are, where you've been able to do that? Like, here's what our data shows. What is yours at Emory or elsewhere show? Or Matt, is that maybe next? Is that something you see your other customers doing, like making those kind of comparisons, benefiting from a network effect?
Yeah, I'll jump in first on this one, sure. So yes, we do have some customers that ask for connections to be made. Matt, who else could we work with? Similar sized university, similar sized library. I've actually seen it go the other way, which is I'd like to learn from all of them because like a smaller library may have initiatives underway that a larger library can learn from, and vice versa. It's not always just about size, but we do have customers who ask us to put that together, almost like in a customer advisory board, client advisory board, to connect customers to learn from each other. We are at a point where there's enough critical mass, if you will, to where we're working with partners like you, Elliot. You've been able to look at the anonymized data. There's enough to look at and create some benchmarks and things like that. Later in our roadmap, we do have the long-term goal of building out benchmarks so that Jason could log in and see how are they doing against their peer set, so to speak. The data is there and it's capable of looking at, similar to what you showed at the beginning of this, Elliot, in terms of some of the takeaways from the data. But yeah, that's kind of the current takeaway in terms of how customers are looking at comparing their data.
That's great. Yeah, maybe there's like a state of library usage report in the future or something.
Yes. Yeah.
Not to give you more work to do, but Jason, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, right now we're primarily only concerned with our data. The benchmarking does happen. I'm not personally so involved in that aspect of it. Somebody had asked, like, well, how do what do you do with all this data? We do have an assessment librarian. His name's Matt Frizzell. He uses Tableau. And so we have dashboards that live online, and then I take that information and incorporate it in terms of we have like an impact report that I use to promote us all over campus, and then it lives on our website and all that good stuff. But the thing honestly that kind of keeps us from right now looking at other institutions is that we're in kind of a really unique situation in that we are a STEM library. That drives a lot of our decision makings that would not make any sense at other libraries, like in the fact that we moved most of our collection to cold storage, because the use of our electronic collections dwarf circulation. And that really is driven by the fact that because we're a STEM institution, A codex, a book, whatever you want to call it, is not necessarily the best data repository for the types of data sets that are being produced right now because they're so huge. It would be the size of a building if you tried to actually put it in a book. If you look at those old photos of like NASA coders and they've got the code books that are as tall as they are, I mean, that was coding in the 60s.
Right.
So I say all that to say we're kind of two organizations. I tell this to people all the time. We're kind of two organizations that share the name library. One is an on-campus space directly in the center of campus, open 24 hours a day, inclusive for everyone. Everyone is welcome. They come, they meet, they engage in scholarship, and enjoy the time that they have here. And it's beautiful and it's a physical experience. We're also the electronic infrastructure for the entire research endeavor of Georgia Tech. So we're the ones maintaining all of those contracts for, oh, well, I need this resource because of the grant that I have, and we need these because that supports what we teach. So we're those two organizations. And a lot of the data will intermingle, but because we're in such a specialized location and environment and history with an engineering school, it really has not risen to the level of, well, let's see how we're doing against, we do benchmark against peer institutions on a number of other things.
Yeah.
Not necessarily how many people are coming in the library because it's just been generally successful and people love the buildings and they come in and it's great. And so really what we're trying to figure out right now is how do we make it so that more people come and feel welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to thinking about it, of thinking about it. And like benchmarking is not always the answer. Sometimes that's like the fastest way to be average. And, sometimes you really are a special snowflake and the comparisons aren't, illuminating. They just confuse people. And, it seems like this is a way to think about how to, understand what you have. And we've been talking about the data you've been gathering and the value of it. Matt, I think now seems like a good time to just kind of flip through some of the screenshots from the platform to get a sense of the data that you all are gathering that found its way into that mixed methods report Jason was talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I trust everybody can see the screen okay here. So
Yeah.
I think 5 slides that have some key takeaways from what we're seeing. And now I think to level set here, these are all data points that are taken directly out of our portal, which Jason and others at Georgia Tech would have access to. I think there were some questions in the Q&A and the chat earlier just about how is data accessible. All of this information can be exported. It can also be accessed via API. Here's just some visuals that in this case, this is showing a building level comparison between Crosland, Clough, and Price Gilbert, showing daily occupancy for a roughly a 2-week period here, hours of operation that they're open. What's really interesting from our perspective is, and I think Elliot, you called this out earlier when you're looking at some of the sort of the benchmark data across number of university libraries, where the main library all saw far greater utilization rates as a percent of capacity and size versus auxiliary or supplemental adjacent libraries. And now Jason pointed this out too. All these are really one, if you will. It's kind of by design here, but really interesting to see pretty much, occupancy daily levels are on par with each other. You can definitely see Clough tends to peak a little bit higher, more consistently as well. That's what these little blue or gold dots are. That's kind of the peak value that's seen here. Going to go through a couple others, and this is just the kind of data that every customer can expect to get from an occupancy program. I like to call it occupancy, but you'll see there's other data sets that are available as well. Traffic in terms of people entering the building and dwell time, which we'll dive into in a minute here. Jason touched on this as well, just in terms of seeing how busy spring is. We love seeing this with our clients and our partners. Spring of 25, 7% more traffic. So what you see here, again, this is the spring semester, if you will. That's the of 2025. That's the purplish blue bar. Gold is going to be same time frame, adjusted obviously for the academic calendar last year. That's the gold. Pretty consistently, without fail, you're seeing far greater traffic and occupancy over the course of spring of 25, calculating it all out, 7% increase overall.
Very cool.
Yeah, another interesting takeaway, and this is something I'd love your take on, Jason, too, is this is actually getting into Clough, just the atrium comparison. As you work your way up the building, you'll see that the hourly occupancy and overall occupancy definitely rises. So here you've got the first floor atrium, second floor atrium, those are the two bottom bars, and then you got the third floor, and then the red is the fourth floor. Those are definitely on the higher side. You're starting to see almost throughout the day, nearly 100% utilization occupancy throughout the afternoon, throughout the day on the third floor. So Jason, I'm curious, like when you see this, what comes to mind for you?
Absolutely. So what really you're looking at here, Clough third floor atrium and fourth floor atrium are both study areas. So really what this graph is showing you is where is furniture most optimized for a lot of people to sit and study.
Mm.
So the Clough first floor atrium is a big hallway, and there are humongous uh, lecture halls on one side. Now, we don't measure the occupancy in those lecture halls. That's handled by another unit on campus that cares about how many people are in the actual class. What we're looking at is, okay, there's some seating outside there, but it's mostly a big open area because it's meant for ingress and egress of really tremendous amounts of people at any one time. So what you're seeing there is you're kind of seeing it's catching people, but they're moving through pretty fast.
Mhm.
They're not on 3 and 4 because they're sitting down and they're studying, and there's lots of furniture there for them to be able to do that.
Right.
2 is kind of like the other main entrance to the building. And I can pretty much guarantee you that a lot of this second floor atrium is people going to class, going to all this other stuff, going to the coffee shop. So we know people study on the third and fourth floor because those are actually what connect to the library as well. It is an
Yeah.
unbroken study into the library, study into the library. And
Yeah.
so this
What I
confirms what you would see if you walked in the building.
what I think is kind of interesting about this is, I think people often change their behavior at different rates than buildings or technology themselves can, or even the services can change. So, like when I think knowing these spaces a little bit, it it sort of parallels the way that lobbies have changed. Lobbies, whether it's a building or a hotel, they used to be these empty, vacuous spaces to move through, and now they're becoming places to be in with seating and amenities and events and programming and pop-ups and all kinds of things. And what this says to me, I mean, again, this doesn't give you the answer, but it tells you where to look, right? Is that maybe there's an opportunity to like catch the space up with the new ways that people use it or want to use it. And I think it's pretty clear it's pretty interesting to be able to do that. I think we've got some questions about or well, I guess we got a little bit more data to go through, and then we'll take some
Oh
questions.
yeah, it's okay. We can jump into questions too. I was just gonna riff off for a second here what we were talking about, Elliot and Jason, about what you saw here, and as you worked your way up the building. The other data metric that is really interesting and very revealing here, different tower, different building, but as you work your way up the building, and that's what you see essentially second floor, third floor, so all the way up to the seventh floor. These are dwell times. So on average, how long are people spending time in a space? What I heard you say earlier, Jason, is this is all by design. So imagine if you had something by design, but the data showed the opposite. So this is validating, which is fantastic, but likely helps reinforce kind of the decisions that you're making, how to design spaces, proving that as you design those spaces, they are in fact working for students the way that you'd like it to be and intended to be. But also gives you data in the other areas too. How are those spaces being used? So it's not just by design, but at the same time, you get some visibility into how long are people spending time on average in other areas, like third floor, for instance, sees generally among the lowest dwell times.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and I would say that is absolutely by design. So what you're looking at there, second floor is a big studio space. So
Mhm.
people come in, they camp. Third floor can be a lot more service oriented.
Yep.
Certainly the print studio is gonna drop the overall dwell time because people are coming in, they're using the specialty
More
plotters.
transactional, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or they're using the specialty machines that we have, high performance machines, and then going 7, 6, 2. It's I'm spread out, I'm here, I'm mentally focused.
Cool. And there's one slide left here. This is just a view that allows Jason to zoom all the way out and just start to look at an entire portfolio view of all their spaces sorted by average utilization. And you can sort it ascending, descending. In this case, this just helps him quickly hone in on the areas that are getting the least utilization. And what's interesting from all of our work in higher education, we do see in libraries, typically, if there are any spaces associated with or assigned to faculty, very low utilization rates here too. But again, it takes, what might be an observation of, I believe that the space is underutilized, and gives Jason and or others the raw data to have it, a very data-driven discussion about how space is used. Maybe it's an optimization of space, reallocation, repurposing of space to really create further environments that are engaging with students, providing better services to the students. So there's just some quick snapshots. Again, there's an opportunity to go a lot deeper into the data, but hopefully that helps paint a picture, very high level of how you can really start knowing how spaces are used across a few different dimensions.
And I think with that, I'd love to hear a little bit, Jason, about how you're using this data. You've mentioned some keywords like renovation and strategic planning, but spend a couple minutes walking us through how you're using this stuff now, how it's helping.
Absolutely. So in what he just showed, so you can see that faculty research zone is absolutely underutilized. So we know it's underutilized, and so in the short term, what we have done is we've held these things we call bubbling up. And so what we do is we invite faculty experts, we pick a topic, and then we literally have like a wine and cheese mixer in the faculty research zone to try and get people to come. The rest of the time, it's just not really used as much as we would like to see. It was an experiment based on the data that Elliot, you were there for, where it was at Georgia Tech, as I'm sure it is at a number of schools. If you are an early career faculty member and you come to campus, your office is probably going to be like a coat closet and might not even have a light in it or anything, right? So we were like, well, let's provide faculty with big, nice, open, beautiful spaces. They can come, they can meet. Some swear by it, some live by it, but it's just not utilized that well. So when we're looking at how we can optimize our spaces, that space, kind of an interesting thing about the library is that space is behind glass on the fourth floor of Price Gilbert. So what this data is telling me is if we turn that into study space, which someone had asked, is quiet study space an actual like thing, or if it is denoted. It says quiet floor, be quiet. And trust me, if you talk up there, you're going to get the death stare from people. But since it's behind glass, it kind of gives us an interesting opportunity to be able to turn that into quiet space on a non-quiet floor. And it's kind of perfectly situated too. The way we've done it is grove or ground level 1, 2, 3, 4 are all active and have lots of services. 5 is a staff floor to completely cut off the rest. 6 and 7 are completely quiet. Half of 6 is grad space. Half of 6 is anybody else can use it. Half of 7 is quiet space. And then the other part of 7 is like these really nice terraces where you can study it outside, in a big, nice conference room that's used for like, visiting scholars and all sorts of things. But so just that data is telling me we got to flip for faculty research zone and turn it into quiet space. And when we turn it into quiet space, you're going to see that dwell time shoot up and you're going to see occupancy shoot up because we know that we need more of it. Everybody wants to be on 6 and 7. That's where they want to be. So if we can give them a little taste on 4, it'll be fun.
That's a great example of how you're using it to drive and inform those kinds of renovations, know where to look and know what to change, and how you can scale up some success. We've got about 10 minutes left. We have two sort of bottom line type questions. One is about defining student success, and the other is about what it costs that we'll get to shortly. I want to talk a little bit about how we generalize or extend or extrapolate from the Georgia Tech success elsewhere in terms of best practices. And so, Matt, maybe you could talk a little bit about, in addition to what Jason mentioned, what are the use cases, like what are the ways you see your clients using this data?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, especially in the situation where we have student occupied spaces, I think I always ground myself in these discussions around use the data, use the service to enhance student experiences, right? First and foremost, good starting point. All of these examples and use cases are additive. You can choose 3 of the 5, you can choose all of the 5, but first and foremost, I think providing a service to the students that are going to help them make better, smarter decisions on campus, use their time more wisely, be more efficient with the resources, more productive, is going to lead to better outcomes, better experiences. So that's first things first is, use the data and apply it to create better student experiences. Present how busy spaces in the library are, similar to the original use case. Second, I think by knowing how spaces are used, so instead of guessing, having that actual data, libraries can design, redesign, validate, invalidate, optimize how spaces are actually used. So they can design, redesign, things like that. But having the data creates a much more powerful internal dialogue that's supported with rationale as to whether or not you're trying to convert a faculty zone to a quiet study space to prove that it's worthy of further investment. Like the data is there. And then the third I'd say is, now that we have quite a few budgeting cycles under our belt with our customers, we're seeing more and more that this data is used to validate and get approval on budgets. So not just annual budgets for library operating expenses and things like that, but also budgets for items like I talked about earlier around design, renovation, furniture, reinvesting in spaces that the data is showing and validating are being used heavily by students. And then I'll sneak in a fourth here just because it's something that's really bubbling up to the surface a lot lately is, and when you have this data, there's a lot of other applications that we're seeing customers use. One that's being pointed to often now is using the data to tie into building systems to reduce energy costs. And so that's another application, another benefit that our customers are starting to use. And again, you can start stacking these, using them in a variety of different ways. There's a question in the Q&A, I believe, about tying it with facilities data, which can be done as well.
Yeah, I really like that. The understanding, the budgeting, the planning, the renovating, that all makes sense. And as I think about this, like having helped build on Georgia Tech's culture of assessment and continuous improvement, 10 years ago,
yeah,
it's pretty awesome to see this come to light. And I would say the data only gets you so far, and building that culture is really critical. And I think it starts with, Jason, you've mentioned some of these things, like it starts with the governance structure, right? When you're looking at platforms, you're talking to students, you're talking to your advisory boards, they're telling you no cameras. I think it's also, embracing things like pilots and experimentation and like framing the data and assessment as continuous improvement. You're kind of taking away the fear. I think another thing I've seen is certainly, like, as you gather data, getting a commitment to act on it from the people who are doing the asking, because then you're building trust and credibility, because you're not just like gathering data for its own sake. You're gathering data to make decisions and to, Matt, like you're saying, improve the experience. And I could keep going on this. This is like student success and the role that data plays is like my, I wrote a whole book about breaking down silos for student success, and coming out in July. So maybe I'll leave it at there. And Jason, I'll ask you maybe for a final word of advice for folks that are thinking about, how to use these different mixed methods, and and really like bring together different sources of data to make the case and to help students succeed.
I just want to say, I think you made a wonderful point in terms of building that culture of assessment. That it really does go hand in hand with having the data streams, because you can have the data streams, but unless you have, and this is the term, so our dean just wrote a piece for New York Times in which he was talking about the importance of the kind of democratization of ideas and leadership throughout the library. And the people that are closest to our customers, the folks at our info desk, which is our circulation desk, the ones that are interacting with people every day, they go, "Hey, wait a minute, what about this idea?" Right? And they're able to bring that idea. And there's an entire infrastructure and belief system around, I can do this and I can make this happen. And we've got the people that we need to be able to see this through. We've done it before, we're going to do it again. And it's really about building that capacity in the library itself, which is, and dean down,
Yeah,
facilities up. It is just a concerted effort among everyone.
that's awesome. And I mean, when we came up with the library vision, we had security guards in the town hall meeting, and like some of the best ideas. I think that's just like part of who you are, and it's awesome. Matt, can you want to address this bottom line question about how you figure out the cost?
Yeah, so the cost is typically, the simplest way is think about on a dollar, price per square foot basis. In terms of recurring software licensing fees, every client scenario is going to be different. And what I mean by that is it's driven off of the level of granularity and the space that a customer has. So I'd say there's no obligation. We've got a design team that looks at floor plans and designs approaches all day long. We'd welcome hearing from anybody, and we'd be able to provide a very quick quote in terms of what the cost in the service would run. Generally, it's still going to be on average about 20 to 40 cents per square foot per year. There's edge cases on both sides depending on the size, the scale, and the level of granularity that a customer is looking for.
Well, great. And as we wrap up, maybe you could pull up how folks can learn more. You can contact us at any time to learn more about this, whether it's a consultation about how to gather the data or what to do with it, or the decisions you have to make, how to inform strategic planning or operations. We'd welcome a conversation. And we also like to share what we're learning together as we work with all these different institutions. Last year, we put together a white paper that you can get via that QR code, or I also just put it in the chat, where we looked at anonymized sensor data from 38 institutions, and we found some of the things I was showing earlier about, student success functions driving usage. We didn't quite get to defining student success. That's maybe its own webinar. But what I'll say is, I think what we've been talking about throughout this conversation is really helping students study, work on projects, access services, find each other, belong to a community, meet their functional needs with space, with technology, with services. And I think student success sits at the center of that, and it relies on the right strategy, the right culture, to center on student success, to gather the data, to focus on continuous improvement. You need the right spaces, you need the right services, you need the right staffing, and then you need the right technology systems to know how well those are working. And we really appreciate everybody's all the information and everybody's insights and ideas today. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Elliot. Yeah, I'll just say thank you so much to Jason, Matt, and Elliot for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording and where to access today's slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon on another session.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.